You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, I was reading just a little bit ago about the connection between Drew Lock and your boy Noah Fant. That is a connection we're hoping to hear for many years to come.
This is going to be maybe a little bit of the theme of the episode today later on, but to be a pessimist here, I've been in this OTA game long enough to know that I don't put much of stock in anything. I mean, it's fun to hear about it and see the clips, but until I see it on the field in the regular season, it's fluff to fill the offseason. But, I mean, hey, that's what we're here for, right?
Right. It's true. And I guess it's one of those things for me. At least you're hearing good things.
Yeah,
If
true.
you're hearing a lot of bad things, then it might be a little bit more to worry about if they can't make it work in OTAs.
I just remember Trevor Siemian having the arm of the gods, Cody Latimer absolutely killing everybody in OTAs, and Case Keenum looking amazing last year. So it's stuff that, I mean, I've said it on here before, I believe, but I really believe it. You know, doing it in practice in this kind of situation, that's one thing. Doing it in preseason is another thing. And then doing it in the regular season is another thing entirely. So got to see it in those three levels before I can really believe it. But it is good to hear, and I'm glad to see, you know, it's not this Paxton Lynch case where you drafted the guy and it's like, wow, woof, this guy does not belong. What is going on here? So, and fan out there making plays, everybody staying healthy, knock on wood. That's honestly the biggest thing. But excited to see that.
Right. No, I'm with you. And I mean, after seeing Reuben Foster go down earlier this week, definitely knocking on a lot of wood, hoping for good luck for the Broncos during this time. But oh my goodness, it's at least football. It's football information, and we're going to have it all on our Twitter accounts and on our podcast, everything else. We want to make sure that you can find us. You can find me on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, and you can find Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. You can also follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod, and make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. Also, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating on where Building the Broncos along with Huddle Up are found under the Huddle Up podcast. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. So today we want to talk a little bit about looking at the roster, some strengths, some weaknesses, what's going to be what helps them to win this season, what's going to maybe bring them down to possibly another losing season. And just kind of break down what we need to see. And some of this is just going to be, at least for me, a little bit of projection. Because some of these players haven't done it to the level that I'm thinking that they're going to do it, at least for my groups that I put down here. And so I'm interested to hear what you have to say about some of these groups that I picked. Some of yours are a little bit more obvious. Mm-hmm. But they're really, really good groups. So let's start with your first one. What is one of the strengths of this roster when you're looking at an entire unit?
Well, for me, I think this offense, you know, I'm excited about Munchak and the upside of the receiving core. That includes adding the tight end, and quarterback's been improved, but the lifeblood of this offense, and it's going to be this season as well, is the run game, and that has to do with the running backs. I know that projector that works for ESPN, Mike Clay, is not as high on the Bronco running backs, but I've got to say, I think 1 through 3, I mean, while there's not a great superstar there, I think Lindsey's obviously really good, but, you know, he's not a Saquon Barkley, Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott level. That the running backs 1 through 3, including Booker, is really solid, and I would say the identity of this offense this season. Games are going to be won. They're going to be grinded. I mean, the offense is still going to be one, although I think it's improving. It's still going to be one that is not great. And I think that as far as their success goes, it'll be very dependent on the running backs. I mean, obviously you have Philip Lindsay, probably one of the darlings of all of football last year. Undrafted free agent, came on like he did, hometown kid, and really great personality as well. I mean, gotta love the hair, gotta love that little smile that he's got. And I know that I call him Squirt, and not everybody loves that name. I bet you he wouldn't love it either. I bet you prefers the Tasmanian Devil, but really a fun player. We talked about him on our other show that we recorded, that we do hope that, obviously, get that wrist and that hand healthy. But if he can improve his ability in the receiving game, he could really, really become a much more dynamic player. Because, I mean, you see his speed, you see the athleticism, the electricity that he brings when he runs the football. It just didn't translate as much to him as a receiver. So that's something that needs to go next level. But got to get healthy first. Royce Freeman, solid running back. Although he did have a lot of carries at Oregon, I think that he's still, he's a rookie running back. You want to use those. I don't know if I'd ever have a running back that's off a rookie contract unless you're signing like a Stephen Ridley type that makes the roster. But I just keep churning guys off from the draft and undrafted free agency. And because honestly, that's when most of them have their most productive years and give their better deals. So why wouldn't you do that? But I think Freeman this year, people are a little bit sleeping on him right now. One of probably my least favorite pick of last year's class, given where they took him. I mean, early third round, not the best for a running back who I think is not. I mean, that you're looking for somebody, in my opinion, you're looking for like a Kareem Hunt level talent. I'm not talking off the field here. That's what I want for a third down running back. And I just don't see that with Freeman. But I think he can be really solid. And I think he's in line for more carries than people think this year. That's what it sounds like is coming out of Denver right now. And again, people that are more connected to the situation than I am saying like, hey, Freeman might actually get the most carries in that Denver backfield. So we'll see there. Again, another guy who can work on his pass blocking especially. I think it did improve last year, and that's something that'll get him on the field. But I want to see that improve more, especially given his size. Just could square up better, be a little bit better with his hands, take it on that free rusher. But should be solid, and I'm excited to see the zone scheme there with him as well, especially the inside zone. Patience has that vision, and hopefully less stacked boxes for both running backs. But I think Royce last year had the highest rate of stacked boxes in the NFL. I believe that might have changed after he got injured, but it was bad. People didn't really appreciate Keenum's arm, which, yeah, can you blame him? And then, as much as people like to crap on Devontae Booker, I think he is pretty solid for a third running back. I mean, you see the flashes in the pass game. He's a solid pass protector out there, still on his rookie deal. The Broncos going to re-sign him after this year? Probably not, unless he's coming back really cheap. But you saw his efficiency, spike up last year, and his yards per attempt were pretty darn solid. He's a pretty good third down back. And if there's an injury in front of him, and you need to see Devontae Booker take 10 to 15 rushes a game and get in there on third downs, I think. I'm not a huge Devontae Booker fan, but people really like to crap on that guy, and I just don't think it's warranted given his play last season. When he was rookie year and people are like, oh, this is going to be the starter. Obviously, he did not live up to those expectations. I don't think he's that capable of a player. But as a third running back, sure, man, that's a solid number 3. And if you're seeing him out there, I think they should work him in more. Honestly, like maybe get some situations where you have him a 2-back set and you move Booker to slot pre-snap and isolate a linebacker out there, because we saw him last year against the Chiefs, 2 years ago against the Colts. He can be pretty dynamic in space, and he looks pretty natural as a receiver. So I'm pretty high on this running back group as a whole. And like I said, I love that they're all on their rookie contracts, because not only are they cheap, they're young, they're going to be more effective. And people aren't going to like me in a few years when Lindsey is set for a contract. People might not like John Elway if that's still a point too, because I don't know if John Elway is going to be paying these kids big money. But either way, right now I'm pretty happy about this running back group, and the offense is going to run through them this year. It's going to be a heavy play action offense, but the running game I think is going to be key, and there's going to be a lot of close controlled games in that regard. But when you have 3 young running backs with the different skill set that these guys have, complement each other pretty darn well, and upside, they're arrow pointing up, especially on Freeman and Lindsey, I think that running backs are by pretty obvious strength, top to bottom, on this roster, and the offense is going to go outside of Flacco, obviously, but the offense is going to go as they're going to go.
Makes complete sense. I'm with you on this group being a pretty easy pick for a strength on this roster. You got 3 guys with starting experience, all 3. Lindsey's gotten some starting last year. Freeman started out the season last year. Devontae Booker, yes, I know a lot of people will, like you said, harp on him when he was the starter. I think he was still coming back from his knee injury. I think he should have been sitting. If you look at his production before, who was it that went down with injury?
It had to be C.J. Anderson.
I think you're right.
It had to be.
He was actually very, very productive when he was on some limited carries. when he started getting that bigger workload that things really started falling apart for him. And so I think, like you said, Booker, when he has efficiency carries, can really be that nice third down back. He is a very good receiver, runs some very smooth routes, and he just knows what he's doing on the field. And so I like this group top to bottom. I mean, if Devontae Booker's your third running back, that's a pretty good value right there. And, I mean, like you said, you're looking at these guys on their rookie contract, and it's one of the cheapest positions on the entire roster, and yet it's one of the most productive. That is just huge value for the Broncos to be able to add players to other places on the roster. So big-time strength of the roster. They should definitely lean on them most of the season. And like you said, I think we're going to win a lot of games on some pretty close matchups.
They have to. Right, that's how this offense is set up right now. We're projecting a lot on the offensive line. I mean, we'll talk about some of these weaknesses, but the only stable thing that I'd say right now is the run blocking and the running backs. Other than that, a lot of hoping, which is fine this time of year.
Right, and that's where we come to my first strength, which is a little bit of hoping in the wide receivers. And I look at this group, and again, this is going to be a little bit of a projection because I don't know the health of Emmanuel Sanders. That'll be a big part of this. But if he is healthy, he is a very, very good number 2. And playing out of that Y position, he has just a great game. I mean, all-around game. He can get open in a hurry. He can make plays down the field. He's a great route runner. I think he's one of the more underrated route runners in the entire league.
Do you mean Z?
Z, sorry. Yes, Z, not Y.
Because Y is the tight end.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
You're good.
And then Courtland Sutton, he showed at least enough promise last year that I feel pretty confident saying that he's going to be a pretty good strength this year to this offense and a big play player for them. Nice weapon in the red zone. And understand, I'm going to include Noah Fant in the receivers group, because he is a very strong receiving option. And so it adds to the strength. Yes, he's a rookie, so we're going to have to see how much he really brings to the roster. But I think he's going to be a very nice weapon. And then you got Deshaun Hamilton. I've always talked about how much I love this kid. We'll see again with Emmanuel Sanders. If he's healthy, Hamilton won't get quite as many snaps. But if he's not, then Hamilton's going to get a lot of work in this roster. And I even think for number 4, Tim Patrick's a pretty good receiver. I think he's a very nice weapon for them. Doesn't have a huge route tree or anything like that, but what he does well. And then they drafted Juwan Winfrey. I think he's going to be more a special teams guy this year. We'll see what he actually brings to the roster. I just don't know enough about the kid to really comment on anything else. But 1 through 4, I think that they are very, very solid moving forward for the Broncos.
Man, Carl, you got me nervous about this team now. I don't know granted, what options do we have? We're talking about 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses, but there is a lot of hoping in that regard. A lot of questions. Can Courtland Sutton take the next step and be a number 1 wide receiver? When Sanders went down last year, he did not look like it. Can Hamilton be better utilized? I mean, he looked like he got open, but the ball's not going to him, so I don't know there. Can Sanders be the same? I mean, coming off that Achilles injury, who knows? So a lot of hoping in that regard. And I mean, you made good points. I'm not trying to just obviously banter, but like if that is, and I don't disagree with you either, but if that's like something that we're banking on as one of the strengths and defining areas of this roster, I'm worried.
Yeah, I understand that. And when I put it, I was going, man, this is a lot of, like you said, a lot of projection of what you hope they're going to be. But I look at this roster, and other than about 3 positions, I would say you're talking about projection more than you are solidly. It's already been proven that this is a strength. And I think we have the others that are actually very solid in saying, yes, this is an absolute strength. There's no denying that this group is going to be good.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if we're talking about each of us having 2 strengths of the roster, that meant there had to be at least 1 projection group.
Yeah. I agree with you completely. And I want to say, just a counterpoint here, this is one that we don't have as either a strength or weakness. Less ceiling, higher floor. The defensive line.
And that was another group that I did think about putting.
Okay. But the main 3 starters, that is.
Right. But again, you said it. they're not the highest ceiling group.
Yeah.
Derek Wolf's on the bottom part of his career. Adam Gotsis is okay. I wouldn't say he's outstanding by any means. Maybe he emerges this year. He's improved every year that he's been in the league.
It's just how valuable is a guy who stops the run, who doesn't really offer too much as a pass rusher.
Right.
Those guys are not paid a lot. So, Adam, if you're listening, get after the quarterback this year if you want to make some money.
And then Shelby Harris, he had his huge moments, but he was still more of a rotation piece last year than an actual starter. And Tremont Jones, I'm excited about that pick. I think he can be that really get after the quarterback kind of guy. And then you're talking about Zach Kerr is another one. He's a nice backup, but nothing more than that.
Did they bring back Billy Wynn?
They did.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think they brought back Billy Wynn.
and I kind of like Billy Wynn.
I mean, even if it's just a camp body. That's
right,
fine.
but I still think he's a guy that can at least push people on the roster.
Yeah.
And then your boy, DeMarcus Walker.
How dare you? I've never actually been this upset.
I'm sorry. That was very mean of me. But again, it's a group that's good, not great.
Yeah. But I would say a much higher floor.
Right. But I would say the wide receiver group has real potential to be a nice set of weapons, especially if you include Noah Fant in that group.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's very fair. My first weakness, not my biggest weakness, got to be linebackers. And while I think the scheme is going to help Todd Davis and Josie Jewell, and Todd Davis, I'd argue last year, people really like to crap on him, and I don't think it's fair because how many linebackers in the NFL are actually true 3-down guys that can play man coverage and when they're isolated against good running backs or tight ends? I mean, probably less than 10, probably closer to like 5 to 7. And so when he's tasked and the team schemes a guy open against him, that's tip of the cap and kind of blaming Joe Woods there. So I think he does get a little bit of a bum rep there. Not the best athlete in space, but I think he's fine, And Josie Jewell, we talked about him on the other podcast. I think definitely in the cover 2 scheme, more zone and everything coming into year 2. That's something I expect him to be better. He can be a little bit more hidden there instead of isolated in space, which is where he has issues. But still, this linebacker group, I mean, even the depth of it, Justin Holland's really a wait and see for me on him. Is he going to be edge? Is he going to be off ball? Sounds like off ball, but again, we saw Hassan Reddick, who was a top 15 pick for the Cardinals a couple years ago, move from edge to off ball, and we haven't heard a peep from him. So expecting a lot from a 5th round pick in that regard of that transition, which is really difficult, is something that, I'll believe it when I see it. So concerns, questions there. And then you got like guys like AJ Johnson, Keyshawn Bieria. So I'm not overly enthused with this linebacker group. I mean, there's a reason a lot of people were screaming for Devin White. There's a reason a lot of people were screaming for Devin Bush. So it's very much wait and see right now for a linebacker. But I think looking at the roster from where we're at, probably the biggest weakness on the defense. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what the Fangio effect is. And I think Todd Davis has 2 more years left on his deal, but his contract could be pretty easily moved on from after this season. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there, but I'm not really loving the linebackers on tape.
I mean, we talked about it before the draft, even before free agency, of the Broncos going after and trying to get some help with this position. And unfortunately, off-ball linebacker position became very, very expensive this offseason. What in the world happened with those contracts? Just too many teams with too much money, I guess you would have to say. And then the draft, they had a chance at Devin Bush. They never had a chance at Devin White, that's for sure. And decided that it was better to trade back, get some extra picks, those kind of things. And I like Devin Bush, but it was one of those I kept saying on this podcast, if they take Devin Bush, I'll be okay, but I won't be really happy. I won't be jumping off the couch, fist bumping people to say, oh my goodness, Broncos just got their guy. And so I don't blame them for passing on him. And right now it's the weakness of the defense, and just have to kind of see where they can go from there. Just kind of build around it as much as you can. And so then for me, my first weakness, I guess I have to go quarterback. I mean, Flacco's an upgrade. And Locke is an upgrade at the backup spot. Ripien's a an upgrade at the third spot, but it's the position of weakness, if we're being really honest here. Quarterback right now, I mean, where would you rank Flacco in starting quarterbacks?
Probably bottom 5, bottom 10. Like, I mean, it's an improvement of Keenum, who I think was legitimately the worst day one starter in the league last year, outside of maybe some rookies and whatnot. But like, yeesh, like Andy Dalton's right there, Joe Flacco, Marcus Mariota. I've not really enjoyed what I've seen from him this year. We don't know yet about Murray, Haskins. Jones isn't a starter. Eli Manning's kind of down there too, but it's not great. Right.
And so as much as it's an upgrade over last season, it's still a weakness on this roster. And the idea of some people have said, well, Flacco, he could be the starter for the next few years. I really hope not. It means, one, Locke has been a bust, and two, we're still looking for that future starter in some way. And I'm hoping the Broncos, again, where they can lead on that run game, play to Flacco's strengths, something they didn't do very well with Keenum last year. Get him in that play action, get him where it's that 3-step hit, throw over the middle, those kind of things that he is very, very good at. But beyond that, you just can't hope that Flacco's all of a sudden going to become a top 10 quarterback, because he's never been a top 10 quarterback. And two, he just has really struggled the last few years with injuries, with just being very streaky at times. And there's a lot of times where I think he gets more credit for being a deep ball guy than he deserves. He likes to throw the deep ball, but a lot of times it's more to get the penalty than it is to get the completion. And so as much as I really am excited to see what Locke can do, this is why I have such low expectations for the Broncos this season, is because I think Flacco improves the team, but not enough to really be that compete with the Chiefs or the Chargers kind of guy.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that you will see better production all around on the offense because they did improve quarterback, but still, I don't think he is a guy that I'm excited about the long term. I've definitely been, for what they did to get him, 4th round pick and how flexible with the contract, I have no issue with bringing him on, but still, you hopefully don't see Locke this year until the very end because you're in contention and Flacco's doing fine. But, I mean, there's a reason he was available for a 4th round pick, Like, people will trade gobs of capital for a quarterback that has potential. And granted, Flacco's on the back, not even the back 9, probably the back 5 of his career, but still not great. And, as much as I think it was an improvement, probably not going to improve the Broncos so much this year. It's more about having a viable stopgap than anything to me. So, but that matches with my expectations of a 7-9 season and hoping for an average offense. Like, that's, the expectations are not that high, but Rome wasn't built in a day. And when you have 11 combined wins in 2 years, it's going to take a little bit of a transition. So I can't disagree with you. That said, I think the quarterback room is probably the best it's been since Manning, Osweiler, fill-in fodder here.
Right. That 2014 season was better. There'd be an argument for that 2015 season of whether it was actually better since Manning was not great.
I'd probably take it. I'd probably still take it.
I would too, just because of the leadership that Manning brought. But beyond that, it's just been, when Trevor Siemian's maybe been the best quarterback we've had in the last, 2016, 17, 18, the last 3 years, that's not a good look.
Yeah, I would take Case Keenum over Trevor Siemian. But that's would you rather get kicked in the knee or stomped on the foot? You know what? Hard pass. I think I'm gonna take a break.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, we got more strengths and weaknesses on this roster to cover, but we're gonna take a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast to kind of go over some of our favorite strengths and weaknesses of this Bronco roster with OTAs, the dead season, the off season. We're going to talk about the Broncos still coming at you. I'm Nick, along with Carl here today on Building the Broncos, and my next strength, probably the best 1-2 punch on this entire team, in my opinion. Screw it, that's a fact. Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. man, talk about a dominating duo of edge rushers. And I think the Broncos not having the fun, explosive offense, and I think people really just don't like John Elway too, that are non-Denver. Obviously that's kind of the way it goes. If you're great, people kind of start to hate you. I hate Tom Brady, but that's exactly why. So Broncos edge rushers, Bradley Chubb, Von Miller, it's got to be the strength of this team. It's the identifying duo of this team. And Von Miller, future Hall of Famer, probably first ballot if he keeps it up and stays clean. Bradley Chubb looking like he's playing himself to some Pro Bowls here in the future. I mean, if he can string together another double sack season, look out. And I would say that this is not only when I talked about the running backs defining the offense, the pass rush of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb defines the entire team. So then obviously there's some debate raging right now in the analytics community, in the Pro Football Focus community of what's more important, pass rush or pass coverage. Well, I'm still, get off my lawn, old guy. Guys who can win one-on-ones up front and get after the quarterback and change how you can scheme, because you have to give attention to them because they can wreck plays. I think it's more important and more valuable than coverage guys. Obviously, there's a variance. It's not binary, but still, edge rushers, the strength of this team overall, Bradley Chubb and Von Miller. Now, I will say, I do not know about the depth. Last year, we could argue, especially in the Super Bowl year, we could argue, DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, or not Bradley Chubb, that would have been pretty killer. But Shaq Barrett and Shane Ray. I mean, Shane Ray just signed by the Ravens. Barrett got a solid contract from the Bucks. That was pretty good edge depth. Not even talking about the starters. That was good edge depth. And now we are hoping on Dakota Watson wherever he's going to play, Justin Hollins again wherever he's going to play, Jeff Holland, and maybe Malik Reed. Edge depth, not great, and that concerns me as somebody who. I've seen a lot of great defenses over the recent years. Patriots last year, Eagles past 2 years, Seahawks during their run. A lot is made about their coverage units, but it's that depth of that pass rush and edge and interior, but edge here for our argument here was really strong as well. And that's something the Broncos don't have, but 1 and 2 of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, man, look out. That's really exciting.
So, question for you, because this debate has been raging for a long time. Where would you rank that edge rusher starting group compared to other teams in the NFL?
Well, now you're going to make me think about what other teams have great edge duos.
I would take the Chargers.
I would probably take the Chargers over them right now just because I think Ingram is a more versatile pass rusher than what we see from Chubb at this point. But again, it's because I'm taking the more known quantity. I think Chubb definitely, I would say they have higher upside, but I would say Bosa and Ingram are the safer bet.
Okay, so then you have Houston.
Ah, man, that's really close as well. That one has a lot to do with health, both from Clowney and Watt. I want to go with the Broncos there. I think that Clowney's a bit overrated, great athlete, but I don't know. He's kind of a weird player. He's almost better as a stand-up attacking gap blitzer. And Watt, I'd take Von over Watt at this point. So I'm going to go with the Broncos there.
Okay. I'm thinking the Bears.
Definitely the Broncos. Not a huge – Leonard Floyd is not really stood out enough to me.
Jacksonville, maybe?
So you got Fowler. Where did Fowler sign? Did he re-sign with the Rams?
Did he? Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so not him. So you got Ngakoue and Campbell. I'm taking the Broncos.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of any others. Maybe the Redskins now?
They lost. Montez Sweat, a lot of projection there.
Right.
So I don't know if that's the one that they should go with. That said, there's some potential there. I mean, you got the Eagles, who have Derek Barnett and Brandon Graham. They're solid. And
Vikings with Griffin and Hunter.
Vikings, that's a good one. I'm still taking the Broncos. The only one I can think of for sure that I'd take over them is the Chargers. Honestly, the Raiders, no. You got the Chiefs, no. Let's keep it on the West. Not Seahawks, not 49ers, not Cardinals, not Rams. Packers, no. Bears, no. Lions got an interesting one, but I'm going to go with no. They need a better edge Bills, no. Patriots, no. No. Let's just say it's only the Chargers. That's the only one I can think of off the top of my head that has that.
Okay. That makes sense. I'm with
you?
you. Yeah, I'm with you on that. There's some others that it depends on how the rookies show up, because this was such a good rookie pass rushing group. But beyond that, I can't think of many groups that I'd sit here and say for sure I'd be taking them over to the Broncos. Like I said, the Texans, if they're healthy, I would take them over the Broncos.
Yeah.
But that's usually a pretty big if for them.
Yeah,
and
yeah, I agree with you.
I can't see that one working out well.
Some upside, I guess, with the 49ers with Bosa and Ford.
Right. That was one I was kind of thinking that they could prove to be better. But right now, you can't sit there and say with confidence that they're better, because that would be a huge projection on what you think Bosa's going to be and how Ford. I mean, Ford had one great season.
Yeah.
Let's not overhype how the rest of his career has been pretty average.
Yeah.
So let's not get too crazy after one great season where he's in an offense, or he's in a system that really allowed him to take advantage. They're up 30 points most games.
Yeah.
So he can pin his ears back and just say, I'm going after it.
Ooh, how about the Browns?
Oh, that's a good one.
Their Broncos are better than them, but that's another one worth. They got Olivia Vernon and Myles Garrett. So there's some upside on that one.
Right. I'd still take the Broncos. I mean, Myles Garrett hasn't quite proven to be at Von Miller level yet, at least consistently.
Yeah.
And Olivia Vernon, he's been injured a lot lately. I mean, there's a reason the Giants were willing to let him walk. So I can't take him over Bradley Chubb either at this point.
Yeah, I think Vikings are the other one that's worthy of being discussed. But yeah, overall, looking at these teams, it's got to be the Chargers, and then I have the Vikings and the Broncos pretty close. But Von Miller is so freaking good, right? Like, he's so good. So
yep.
probably the Broncos, and they're right there with the Chargers. But right now I take the Chargers. But still, very good strength of this team. I would love to have some edge depth, but that's something that hopefully they can stumble into with Malik Reed or Jeff Holland, and maybe address it next year in the draft. I mean, they do have a good amount of picks, but having a good third edge rusher, that way you can play around with those guys a little bit, move them around, maybe move Chubb to 5 technique or 4 technique, or maybe even 3 technique and real like NASCAR kind of packages. Von Miller, maybe some Sam off-ball kind of looks going on where you can move those guys around. But the top 2, they're getting after it, and that's something that people are sleeping on right now. People are sleeping on Chubb, but I think that pass rush duo people are sleeping on as well.
Sounds good. Well, my next strength of this team, and this depends on where you put Kareem Jackson, but I'm going to have to go the cornerback group, and I'm going to put Kareem Jackson in that group. And, I mean, you got Chris Harris, obviously, probably right now, second best player on this roster. If we're looking at history, I think others could pass him this year, but right now Chris Harris has to be the number 2 cornerback on this roster. And then, of course, you got Bryce Callahan added, Kareem Jackson. Both of them were ranked as top 10 cornerbacks this past season, and guys that can Bryce Callahan was one of the best slot corners. We'll see how they rotate those guys into some of those positions. That's one of the big things I'm kind of wondering about. But then you also have Isaac Yiadom, who had some starting experience last year, and a guy that I think could really blossom in year 2 for the Broncos. And so I'm excited to see what this group does. I think they can do a lot of mixing and matching of players compared to their strengths and weaknesses of their abilities. But I am interested to see some of these guys with their switch to that zone coverage. I think Chris Harris can do it. I've seen him do it here for the Broncos plenty. Yiadom, it's a little bit of a question mark with him. But beyond that, the adding of Kareem Jackson, kind of that all-around secondary player, I think that's going to be huge for the Broncos to have that kind of production from the team. And then Bryce Callahan coming over from Chicago, knowing the system already, helps everybody else to get up to par on what they're trying to do. And then I just love the secondary coach they've added. I mean, Donatel, I know he's the defensive coordinator, but his specialty is secondary. And I think he's going to do some great things with this group. And this is that other I don't think you can really question that if you include Kareem Jackson with the cornerback group, this is one of the huge strengths of this roster.
Yeah, I agree with you. However, I think it's a high variance position as well. Bryce Callahan, there's a reason he was available when he was in free agency. There are concerns about injury, and that's something that could crop up. We need to see what we have with the Adam going forward. I mean, definitely some hope, but the scheme change is going to change his effectiveness. I don't know if he's the best fit in his own scheme compared to a more pressed man. And Chris Harris Jr., I mean, that situation's still up in the air. So I agree with you, and especially when you add in Kareem Jackson as like kind of hybrid guy, I do like what this secondary is looking like. But I think, I mean, obviously, since I made this outline, you made the other episode outline, I got to take the easier, obvious one, so had to go with some. But I think that there is a little bit of hoping on this one, and it's more hoping in ways of health rather than guys taking that next step as opposed to the wide receiver.
And it is, but I mean, we could talk about that with the tight end position too.
That's way hoping.
Right. And some of these positions, they've just had injuries crop up. I mean, if Ronald Leary is back to his top level self, then that offensive line, you could look at that. And if Dalton Reisner is going to live up to his hype, I mean, there's a lot of ifs on this roster.
Yeah.
And when you're a bottom 10 team in the NFL, that's kind of where you're going to be. If 2015, there weren't many ifs on the roster. You pretty much knew, unless there was injuries, who the 53-man roster was going to be. You knew who the starters were going to be. You knew. We're not that team right now. And so it is going to be a little bit of a guessing game on what kind of production we're going to get from this roster. And so much also depends on the coaching staff. I mean, we're hoping that this is a better coaching staff.
Yeah.
But it's not proven yet. Vic Fangio, first time being a head coach. How's that going to go? There's not great. I mean, if you look at the statistics of coaches his age getting their first head coaching job, it's not good.
Nope.
Rich Scangarello, we're hoping he's going to bring a really dynamic offense to the Broncos and something that plays well, has a little bit more creativity to it compared to what we had last year. But again, we don't know. He's never been an OC in the NFL. Ed Donatel, he has the title of defensive coordinator, but I don't know if you'd really say he's for sure the absolute defensive coordinator.
Yep.
So
it's a lot of hoping.
Yeah, it is. And that's what we are as fans.
We're analysts.
Okay. But there's some fan in there. we analyze it, but we also have some hope
rooting
built in as well. Yes, there's rooting interest in this. And so I'm seeing, you know me, I'm the eternal optimist. You're the pessimist. That's kind of how we function well together. You bring me down a little bit to remind me, hey, this isn't as good as maybe you think. And I maybe hopefully bring you up a little bit to say, okay, you know what? There is some good out there.
And I wouldn't say you are overly optimistic. There are some out there that are predicting 12-4 seasons and stuff like that. So you're, and I wouldn't say the Broncos are the worst ever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're saying 7-9. I'm saying 8-8.
Yeah. Ooh, man. Big variance there. All right. Well, next on, move into the weaknesses. Push it along here. My weakness that I have is offensive line depth. I mean, looking at the tackle position, if Juwan James or Garrett Bowles go down, and I'm not even, Garrett Bowles the average, but like if either of them go down, Broncos are in for a world of hurt. And if you've seen anything, if you follow the NFL landscape at all, you know that offensive lines, the starting five to start the year is hardly ever the starting five to finish the year. It's a grueling position, and your depth is going to be tested there as much as anywhere else. And right now, not great. Nico Falah, who's a guy that I was hoping to maybe take the next step, had an injury done for the year. Other than that, I mean, the tackle, like I said, tackle's not great. Interior offensive line, we're hoping on Dalton Reisner, Connor McGovern, year 2.5 for him, getting more starting experience. It's probably playing center, but again, not sure. And then you got Ronald Leary, injuries, Elijah Wilkinson, okay last year, young, solid depth. But other than that, I mean, not great, right? Like, it's not great. So
we've heard good things about Sam Jones.
Yeah, Sam Jones is one, and there's an undrafted free agent.
John Leglu?
Yes, that's the one from Tulane.
Yeah.
Who's a 6'7" interior offensive lineman. I'm curious to see that. I can't really think of many that tall interior offensive linemen. The only one I can think of is Andreas Pete with the Saints, who I think might have just retired. But yeah, no, it's offensive line depth, not great. And while I do trust Munchak and everything to get a little bit better there and whatnot, I mean, the coaching discipline, the unit of itself, the offensive line needs to be a cohesive unit. That should help. But still, it's going to be a unit where your depth is going to be tested. And right now, the Broncos' depth is not great. And, that could be said for a lot of teams, but I think the Broncos are specifically looking at who they have, specifically at tackle above all. And given, Bowles' up and down play, Juwan James's injury history, that's a major concern for me.
You did forget one name, Don Barclay.
Oh.
The Broncos did sign him, the longtime Green Bay Packer.
Okay.
But, I mean, he has bounced around the NFL since then and has had a lot of...
the long Pro Bowl long snapper, too.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. But no, he's had a lot of injuries, and so that's why the Broncos could sign him for so cheap and sign him to a futures contract. But he does have 25 starts in the NFL, played in 65 games. So if we're looking at a backup guy, at least he's got some experience in the NFL.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
they also have Schlottman, who was a undrafted free agent, and he's coming into year 2 out of TCU. So we'll see there. You never know, man. If they held on to him, there's got to be a reason for that. But overall, concerns. I think that's the best way to put it. There are concerns.
Very, very much so. Even among the starters,
yeah,
there's a lot of unknown. Garrett Bowles is going to take that next step. Ronald Leary, how is he going to do coming back from injury? Connor McGovern was pretty average at center last year. Can he take that next step at the position? Dalton Reisner, he's a rookie. Juwan James, he's been up and down. He's been pretty inconsistent at times.
Yep.
And you just paid him the big contracts. There's a lot of pressure on his shoulders to perform, since now he has the second highest right tackle contract since the Raiders decided to move their guy back over to right tackle.
We just need to start calling him tackle. That's how we need to look at him. And the shotgun, true. I mean, it doesn't matter as much.
Right. You're right. But no, I'm with you. It's definitely a concern. It's hard. Well, it's hard enough to put together a starting offensive line that's good, of quality. So then to have backups, that's even harder. So
that was a big reason I wanted to sign Billy Turner.
Yeah.
But he got paid. He got paid big bucks. I was shocked what the Packers gave him. I mean, thank you, Packers. We're going to get a better comp pick because of that. But that was the versatility, and you could see him playing 3 different positions at a solid level. That's something that's key, obviously the versatility. But now the tackle depth is, it's Elijah Wilkinson, right? That's probably it. Leglu, maybe. It's a concern. There's no doubt about it. And last year people were calling for Garrett Bowles to get benched. Well, there's some time where that might be viable this year. We'll see. But you don't have a viable guy to push him in there. That's, you put in Reisner at left tackle. God, I hope not. Not for his own sake. I hope not. So yeah, that's offensive line depth is a concern.
Personally, what I would do, I would move Juwan James over left tackle and put Reisner at right tackle.
To play right.
Do what?
You just paid him all that money to play right, though.
I know, but
and you just
there's nobody else.
You displaced so many. I probably put Wilkinson there.
Would you? Okay.
You're going to take a loss at left tackle, but at least the other guys are going to be not shifted as much. So
that's true.
The relationships and the cohesiveness isn't being totally foobarred.
That is very true.
That's my thought process, at least.
Okay.
Not great, though.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. All right. Well, my final weakness that I wanted to talk about, and I guess I'm getting to the depth conversation as well, and even some starter conversation about this as well, but it's the safety group.
Yeah.
I mean, Justin Simmons, we're hoping for a really nice bounce back season for him, but he didn't look great last year. Will Parks had some good moments, but it wasn't anything too exciting. Kareem Jackson depends if you put him at safety or cornerback. And then there's a lot of guys that have shown promise at the safety group, but nothing that I guess I would say makes you just jump out of your chair either. You got Sua Cravens that I don't even know if he's going to make the roster. DeMonte Thomas, Jamal Carter, Trey Marshall, Shamarko Thomas. I mean, and again, some of these names, you're sitting here saying they could be something, but none of them have done it on the field enough to sit there and say, yes, they are really quality backups or guys that I would want there starting. I mean, part of it for me, I guess, was with looking at these depth guys is looking at the starters and saying both of them their contracts are up after this season. And so do I see any of these guys being able to step in and be a quality starter after this season? Maybe. But right now, I can't say that with certainty.
Yeah. I am 100% with you there. And not only is it the safety depth of concern, I mean, obviously, Trey Marshall, DeMonte Thomas, Jamal Carter, Sua Cravens. I mean, there's a lot of bodies there, but really a lot of unknowns. I will say, though, with Kareem Jackson there, I feel much better. That pushes everybody down one slot. If Will Parks is your number 3, Jamal Carter, then a lot of those competition there, I'd feel much better about it. But
it's true. It's true. It just Kareem Jackson, it kind of really does depend if you put him at safety or corner, which group you want to put him at, of which group's going to be the strength, which group's going to be the weakness. Because if Chris Harris and Bryce Callahan are your starters for the cornerback group and Kareem Jackson's not a part of that group, then I would really question that cornerback group and say, man, either of those guys go down with injury, we're in a lot of trouble. If you include Kareem Jackson in that group, it looks a little bit better. Same with the safety group.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'm really excited to see what year 2 has, or I guess this is year 4, but the next year has in store for Justin Simmons. I think if anybody's going to see a big boon, that a guy that I'm still pretty high on despite a up and down season last year, it's Justin Simmons. So I'm excited about that. All right, well, we still got one more bit of business to get to, but first a break.
Huddle Up podcast listeners, check this out. If you've been thinking about becoming a Mile High Huddle VIP subscriber, now's the time to do it. We have a phenomenal offer to get your foot in the door as a new VIP. Right now, you can get your first month of VIP for $1. That's insane value, and it immediately gives you access to all of the premium content we produce. If you want to subscribe for the year, new annual subscribers will get 30% off the cost of a membership. Never before have we been able to offer new subscribers this kind of introductory incentive to pull the trigger. This is how you get access to our VIP mailbags every Friday. Zach and I answer each and every question from our VIPs, even if it means an episode goes a little bit long. Jumping on this offer also gives you 100% access to every piece of content we produce on the front page, including our Broncos film room breakdowns and every other form of deep dive Broncos content our site is known for. VIPs also get entry into our members-only MHH Insiders Forum, where you hear the insider buzz first from our talented and plugged-in staff, and you get to engage with other passionate and knowledgeable fans just like you. Becoming a VIP subscriber, you guys, it's the best way to support the work and the time Zach and I put into producing a daily podcast for your listening pleasure and edification. So go to milehighhuddle.com, click on the green banner, choose monthly or annual, and you are locked in. The regular season will be here before you know it, so jump on one of these offers, Broncos country.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we're back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I'm Nick Kendell, along with Carl Dumler, and we've been doing the roster strengths and weaknesses, and we got one more little segment here where we kind of teased ahead a little earlier. Nick the pessimist, Carl the optimist, and I'll go first here. Nick the pessimist, something about this team that, I feel like people are not overhyping right now, but I think the expectations for year one are too high. Rome wasn't built in a day. This team is going to take a couple seasons to turn around, especially with how tough the division is, how tough the schedule is, and just the roster turnover that's taking place, schemes changing, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of variables here, but my main thing for pessimism right now is the offensive line in regards to the Munchak effect. I do think that over a couple seasons, especially, a year from now, we're looking at the Broncos offensive line. I think the Munchak effect is going to have a big role, but as far as this season goes, we already touched on the questions with the roster and the depth there. I think it's going to take a couple seasons for Munchak to really have his influence shown on the field. I think the offensive line will be better this year, but how much is it going to be year one, given the questions that we see? I don't know. I feel like everybody's, just like, oh, Broncos offensive line, write in Munchak's name. We're great. And I'm just a little bit more skeptical of that right now, especially when you add into account that the Broncos might have one of the least what's the word I'm looking for? Athletic, the most pocket-based quarterback in the NFL right now in terms of evading pressure in Joe Flacco. So call me a skeptic for now. I believe in Munchak, but year one offensive line, I don't know how much greater this offensive line will be next year. I'm definitely wait and see there.
That makes total sense. I mean, you think about Munchak is really getting handed 3 players that he did not handpick. When you talk about Garrett Bowles, Ronald Leary, and McGovern. And especially Ronald Leary is not a very good fit in what they're trying to do this year with the offensive line. He's coming off injury. I don't even know what he's going to be this season. Again, McGovern was okay at center, but nothing special. Bowles was okay at left tackle, but nothing special. And so really right now he's got 2 players that he has handpicked in Dwan James and Dalton Reisner. That's not enough to really say this is going to be the year that this offensive line really takes off. I hope so. And I do expect a better unit, especially pass blocking, than last year. But I don't expect it to be such a huge jump that, like you said, fans have been talking, oh my goodness, Munchak fixes everything. That's not true. Players still got to go out there and play. And he can only do so much with what he can teach them, especially in today's NFL where you are very limited on the number of practices that you actually get to work with these guys. Plus, even in those practices, a lot of them are without pads. And that's really tough for the offensive line to learn. So I do agree. I think year 2, year 3 is where you're going to really see this take off and say, oh my goodness, this was such an incredible signing for the Broncos. And so then Carl the Optimist, this is maybe wishful thinking and hoping. This is about the only way that I see the Broncos being a playoff team. But Flacco returning to a very similar offense to what he ran in 2014 returns to that kind of form. And if he can play at that 2014 level, then I do think the Broncos are a playoff team. And I do think he's very comfortable. I think he was excited to get kind of out of Baltimore. I think there was a lot of, once he got that contract, so much pressure put on him of, oh my goodness, now I have to be the man. And he just couldn't quite live up to that. Where in Denver, I don't think the expectations are quite that high and put on him. And especially last year had a first-round quarterback breathing down his back. This year he does have a second-round quarterback breathing down his back, but I don't think the Broncos are as much pushing Drew Lock as that guy that has to start this year. And so I think Flacco can get very comfortable with this offense, and I think he could actually have a really nice bounce-back year compared to maybe what some people are thinking.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and hopefully we'll see that, but I'm still a little bit skeptical. I just want him to do good enough that we can bitch about other things. Like, honestly, I'm so tired of bitching about quarterback. And I know it'll continue because, gosh darn it. But, like, I just would love to be able to talk about other areas of the roster that need some help. You know, like, how refreshing was it, the draft class where we ended up taking Bulls, and granted, that turned out to be a pretty poor class, but, like, the whole conversation wasn't surrounded about quarterback the entire time because we still had, quote-unquote, hope in a first-round pick in Paxton Lynch. Very wrong, too. I'm glad you still owe me that beer. But yes. Still, I'm hoping that Flacco can step up, offer some stability, and just even if the offense can be, I don't know, ranked 18th this year, that would be a step in the right direction, and I am so here for it. So we'll see. I don't know about 2014, though, Carl. I mean, again, we're all so many things we're hoping on. The offense has turned over so much, but not only the roster, but the scheme. So we will see, man. We just really need football to get back here. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you guys soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.